Night was slowly falling over Ouagadougou. The streets were filled with shadows and murmurs, while the streetlights struggled to break through the darkness that dominated the city. Amidst the discreet movement, a man walked alone through the central square. He was dressed simply, a light cotton shirt, worn-out pants, leather sandals. There was no bodyguard. There was no entourage. To all the hurried glances, he was just one of many. His serious but serene face did not betray the weight he carried on his shoulders. Attentive but humble eyes observed every detail around him. The street vendors, the board guards, the children playing under the worried gaze of their mothers. He did not seek to be noticed. On the contrary, he seemed almost to want to disappear into the flow of the city. He was a silent observer of the people themselves. The wind carried dust and rumors, mixing the smell of wet earth with that of spices, and the sweat of the workers. No one there imagined that this man would, at that moment, be the protagonist of a story that would reveal hidden truths, and that would remind everyone that behind humility there can be a force capable of changing the destiny of a nation, a force called Ibrahim Traoré. In the brightly lit lobby of a government building, where politicians and businessmen mingled in expensive suits and forced smiles, the man in simple clothes attracted little attention. He passed through security, without resistance, only to be stopped abruptly by a uniformed guard with a suspicious look. "Hey, you! Where do you think you're going dressed like that?" The guard shouted, attracting curious glances from some of the people present. The silence that followed was piercing. The man stopped and stared at the guard for a brief moment, not angrily, but with a calmness that seemed almost defiant. Even so, without saying a word, he handed over his documents with a calm gesture. The guard, laughing disdainfully, did not even bother to check them properly. He took a step forward, pushing the man lightly on the shoulder. "This is not a place for just anyone. Go back the way you came," he said arrogantly. On the other side of the room, a small group of businessmen watched the scene, laughing among themselves as if they were witnessing something trivial, just another everyday humiliation in a country marked by deep social hierarchies. To them, it was unimaginable that this simple man would have any importance, but in the air, something invisible was beginning to change, something that would soon become impossible to ignore. The murmur in the lobby grew, like a wave threatening to break the dam of indifference. The man remained motionless, without reacting to the offense, while the guard, encouraged by the laughter, began to raise his voice even higher. "Do you think you can get in here just because you walk with your head held high? Go away before I have you dragged out," he threatened, his tone imbued with contempt. Some people present began to discreetly record the scene with their cell phones, more for fun than out of indignation. No one there realized that the very future of the nation was watching everything. Silently, with eyes that had already seen the people's pain, their thirst for justice, their urgent need for change. Each word of humiliation was a dull blade trying to cut through something that was beyond their comprehension. The man then took a deep breath. His eyes, which until then had only carried serenity, now shone with something else, something between patience and contained fury. He knew that the right moment was approaching. He knew that the truth, like the inevitable dawn, would soon tear through that darkness of arrogance and ignorance. However, it was not yet time to speak. It was necessary to wait and observe. Suddenly, The deep sound of engines echoed down the avenue leading to the building. All eyes turned to the glass doors, where a fleet of armored military vehicles began to pull up. Within seconds, armed soldiers got out of their cars, forming a security line. There was no panic, but the weight of authority was palpable in the air. An imposing and determined major entered the lobby, scanning the crowd with steady eyes until he stopped in front of the humble man. "President Traoré," said the major, saluting in a position of absolute respect. Silence was instantaneous. The laughter ceased. The expressions of contempt froze into astonished looks. Those who had mocked him turned pale, as if they had been struck by lightning. Some dropped their cell phones. Others tried to move away discreetly, as if they could erase what they had done. Ibrahim Traoré looked up. There was no hatred in his expression, only a dignity so immense that it seemed to fill the space around him. He stepped forward, looked directly at the guard who had humiliated him, and said in a calm but unmistakable voice, "Respect is not demanded with uniforms or titles. It is earned with the soul." The weight of his words seemed to echo off the walls, reaching even those who tried in vain to hide from their own embarrassment. The guard who had pushed Traoré tried to straighten his posture, but his hands were visibly shaking. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he stammered disjointed apologies, unable to keep his eyes on the man he now recognized as the country's supreme leader. His face, previously hardened by arrogance, now reflected a childish terror, as if he had been exposed in front of the entire world. The businessmen who had been amused by the humiliation turned their attention to their phones, feigning concern over non-existent messages. Some tried to approach discreetly, hoping to offer an apology, but they were paralyzed by Traoré's silent presence. The shame was overwhelming. The weight of the revelation had stripped away his social masks, revealing the fragility of his false power. Amidst the general discomfort, Ibrahim Traoré remained motionless, like a mountain facing a storm of despair. There was no need for shouting or threats. His silence spoke louder than any sentence. It was a painful reminder. Genuine respect is born of character, not appearance. And at that moment, every embarrassed look was living proof that this lesson would never be forgotten. Ibrahim Traoré did not demand an apology. He did not order public punishments, nor did he seek to humiliate those who had offended him. Instead, with the same serenity with which he had entered, he walked to the improvised pulpit in the center of the hall. His presence seemed to restore the natural order of things, a leadership that did not need to assert itself through force, but through the greatness of example. He spoke few words, but each syllable carried the weight of centuries of struggle and hope. True freedom is not built with arrogance or fear. It is built with respect and courage. Each of us has a role to play in rebuilding the dignity of our people. The choice is yours. His voice was calm but unwavering, like the sound of a bell, echoing over the mountains. When he finished, Traoré did not wait for applause or bows. He simply stepped down from the pulpit and walked back to the people waiting for him outside the building, men, women, and children who, upon seeing him, saw not just a president, but a living symbol of African resistance, of the rebirth of a spirit that had long been sought to extinguish. And there, in the warmth of popular hope, Traoré reaffirmed that the dignity of Africa would never be forgotten. The speech Traoré had given that day was more than just empty words. It was a call to conscience for an entire generation, a call So powerful that, within hours, attempts began to erase it from the internet. Platforms removed videos, links disappeared, and profiles that shared his words were silently deactivated. It was as if they were trying to erase not only the voice of a man, but the echo of a truth that troubled many. But what few understood is that true words cannot be buried. The speech, despite the attacks, remained alive in the hearts of those who had heard it. Each sentence, each pause, each look filled with hope became a seed planted in fertile soil, and sooner or later these seeds would blossom into struggle, consciousness and freedom. The effort to erase Ibrahim Traoré from digital records only confirmed the power of his message. He was not just another political leader. He was the living representation of an indomitable spirit that spanned generations. And no matter how much they tried to silence his speech, the ideas he defended were destined to transcend borders and inspire those who, for a long time, yearned to see Africa rise again with pride and autonomy. The story of Ibrahim Traoré that day was not just an episode of humiliation and revenge. It was a profound lesson in humility, truth, and resilience. He showed that the greatness of a leader is not measured by the clothes he wears, but by the dignity with which he carries his people in his heart. And that true respect is born when we recognize the humanity in others, no matter their appearance, no matter their origin. The modern world, accustomed to idolizing titles and wealth, often forgets that true revolutions are born of the spirit and not of gold. And it is this spirit that Traoré embodies, the spirit of a continent that, despite all attempts to erase it, refuses to be silenced. A continent that awakens not only to demand justice, but to build a new future with its own hands. Let the story of that speech, erased from the internet but never from memory, serve as a reminder to us all. Africa does not need permission to be reborn. It has already been reborn. And as Ibrahim Traoré showed the world, its strength lies precisely in its simplicity, courage, and unshakable faith in its own dignity.